characteristics and was ascribed its own destiny. Whites comprised less than 15% of the population but owned 87% of the land, more than 90% of the wealth, and all the power. Growing up as a member of the European population meant all this land and all the privileges accompanying it was taken for granted. The contact most whites had with black people was with their servants or workers, and most seemed comfortable with this system, which helped to mold their views of the world. It was the only life they knew, the appropriate order of things. White children would socialize solely with other white children. The only black people they knew worked for their parents, and they found it hard to consider the inferior position of these employees as anything other than natural. Under apartheid, black Africans were divided into tribal categories, allocated 10 little parcels of land to express their national identity, and had only contingent rights to live in white South Africa, contingent on having a pass permitting them to work there. Coloreds, mixed-race people, and Asiatics, people with ancestry in the Indian subcontinent, had more rights in white South Africa than Africans, but considerably fewer rights than Europeans. These divisions and subdivisions and the living conditions they created reinforced perceptions of the other. White South Africans therefore tended to view black South Africans as less intelligent, lacking powers of invention or innovation, oversexed, dishonest, and essentially childlike. Coloreds as lazy and alcoholic, and Asiatics as sly and scheming. Europeans were not legally subdivided, but the backwash of the historical conflict among them lingered, hardly surprising since the Brits were responsible for history's first concentration camps. 20,000 Boer children and 8,000 Boer women died in these camps between 1900 and 1902, along with 20,000 black servants, who are rarely mentioned. When I was at school and we played rugby against an Afrikaans school, we might absorb insults such as ruinek, redneck, palmy, sout peel, salty penis, and even poesgesig, cunt face. And we were viewed as softer, weaker, and less patriotic. We in turn imitated their accents in a tone of derision, told jokes about thick Afrikaners, referred to them as Dutchmen, rocks, rock spiders, and crunchies, and generally viewed them as lacking in brain power and sophistication. Even among English speakers, there were subcategories of prejudice. People of Portuguese descent were sometimes called sea Kafirs, and of course the usual range of anti-Semitic prejudices were never far from the surface. This was the world I grew up in, a place that defined its existence in race categories. However, my family history offered me a glimpse of a different view. My father, a Jewish South African, was raised an atheist but converted to Christianity in his 20s. He went on to become an evangelical Anglican clergyman. His relatively liberal mother despised the National Party government, and his own experience of anti-Semitism during the war reinforced his hatred of prejudice. After returning to South Africa in the early 1960s, his first church was in an area where his colored congregants were being forcibly removed from their homes to make way for white people. His colleagues included black clergymen who were regular visitors to our house but had to live under the country's notorious pass laws. The result was that I grew up with more exposure to non-racial ideas and to black people than was common for white children at that time. From my late teens, I became active in anti-apartheid activities, both legal and illegal, which meant working closely with black activists, some of whom became comrades, friends, and eventually family members. It also meant spending time in black townships and homelands, access that was further facilitated by my academic research and journalism. The more I witnessed and experienced the brutal inhumanity of this system, the more I came to despise the deep-rooted racism at its heart. What had once been a mainly cerebral contempt became ever more visceral and personal. I would bristle whenever racism raised its head, so often in casual, unconscious forms, such as apparently well-meaning madams referring to their domestic workers as the girl and garden boy, and addressing them in slow voices of command.